Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy you could join us today. It's my great pleasure to introduce our next special guest, Hereditary Chief Phil Lane Jr., otherwise known as Brother Phil. Brother Phil is the chairman of the Four Worlds International Institute and a global leader in Indigenous development. He is a member of the Ihanktawan, Dakota, and Chickasaw nations, and an internationally recognized leader in human and community development. For more than 50 years, Brother Phil has worked with Indigenous people from North, Central, and South America, Micronesia, Southeast Asia, India, Hawaii, and Africa. He served 16 years as an associate professor at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. His work places unique focus on the importance of culture and spirituality in all elements of human and community development. Brother Phil, it is a great honor and joy to be here with you today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It is a great joy and welcome to be with you as well. Reflecting back the beautiful Shasta spirit as well the Northern Cheyennes. Great to be with you.
Thank you, brother. You touch my heart. Brother, I'm wondering if we could begin with your wisdom and a prayer today.
That'd be wonderful, as we always do. O Titicaca Wakantaga, creator of the universe, most beloved one, all powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one, ever forgiving one. O ancient of days, O blessed beauty, O ancient way, we call upon your holy power and give thanksgiving for all our relatives, past, present, and future, are closer than our closest fame. We ask that we might share today with your inspiration what will uplift our human family, to bring unity, to end war, and begin peace on earth by 2030. We call upon all those tribes and nations of the east from where comes the red sunrise to come together in unity and harmony and give thanksgiving. We call upon all those tribes and nations of the south where comes new life to come together in unity and harmony. Call upon all those tribes and nations of the west from where comes thunder, lightning, and rain to awaken the hearts and minds of our human family for this sacred day as prophesied is unfolding. The day that shall not be followed by night. To Kasha Wakanda, we call upon all those tribes and nations of the north, from where comes the white snow, the north winds, to purify our hearts and minds, to detach us from all save your holy power. And we give great respect to Father Sky and all the masculine elements of life. And also ask forgiveness, for it's these masculine elements of life that have brought us to almost destruction of this Mother Earth and all living things. So we ask especially the importance of giving respect and honor not only our Mother Earth, but the reflection of Mother Earth is womankind. That holy power might arise so truly we might understand the spirituality of the eagle, the condor, the quetzal. Two wings. One represents man and one represents woman. And both wings of that eagle must have equal power, respect, and honor for the eagle of humanity to fly its highest. And to Kashawa Kantaga, I offer this prayer of unity for our human family that was shared with me in Bolivia so many years ago, in 1970. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps to the light of knowledge and share their hearts with their love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Halimi chante washte alo, shinkmano hemeado, chinupasapa hemeado, halimi chante washte. Aho. Aho.
Oh, Brother Phil, thank you for that beautiful prayer and that blessing. I'd like to begin today by talking with you around your work in the world. What brought you to that place that you're sharing with us today?
Well, I was born at Haskell in the Indian Institute, or Haskell Indian School, where they brought really the children of leaders of various indigenous nations across the United States. And I guess the purpose, they thought, was to civilize us, to essentially, as they said at that time, really behind these boarding schools, was to you might say, eliminate the Indian and save the child. But instead, what happened was, when we all came together, many tribes and nations who had never been together before, what happened? Under oppression, under this brutality, they made relatives. And so many of the people I worked with over the years went to school with my mother and father at Haskell. So in the end, as our prophecy said, we'd go through this long spiritual wintertime, 500 years, but then we would arise like phoenix from the ashes. And that's what's happening right now, everywhere and all at once. At the same time, there's this intergenerational trauma. And, my mom and dad both went through that. I can tell you all the stories about that. But the main thing is I grew up with a lot of anger inside me, a lot of anger, angry and hatred at myself for my French, Irish, and English background, that part especially. And what happened, because I read as a little boy, I read all the stories of what happened, as well as the fact that you're lighter complected. On one hand, you go, oh, you can't be indigenous. On the other hand, oh, you can't be indigenous, or whatever you keep, because you also hear, but I understood it later, because when I was 12, my dad always told me, he said, if you're a good boy, son, we're going back home to Wakpala, South Dakota, and your old grandfather, Shukmano, horse thief, and your old grandfather, Chantewashte, strong heart, he's going to give you a name. You got to be a good boy. So sure enough, went there to see my relatives there at Sherwood Corner, and my dear uncle Ulysses Strongheart, he saddled up 3 horses and rode along up into right along Wakpala, up the hills up there. No roads, nothing. I remember on the way, very interesting, there's a rattlesnake. So my uncle got off and killed that rattlesnake and gave me that rattle. I said, here, he said, this is going to be yours. And I've always kind of gotten along with rattlesnakes. They played a good role in my life. Anyway, so up we went. And here he was. And my dad always said to me, how did he know we're coming? There was no roads. There was no electricity. There was nothing. Little place up there in the woods. And here he was sitting out there, waiting for us to arrive. And so he came. And of course, when we come, we always bring groceries and bring some gifts and so forth. Brought those gifts, and they talked back and forth, and of course, Hunkpapas and the Honktawas speak with a D, and the Hunkpapas speak with an L, so they were speaking with an L, and talked about and so forth. He said, Then he told me about how he fought in World War I, how come one of his eyes was gassed, and so forth and so on. And then, my father, after he'd made offerings, asked him. Of course, he knew ahead of time he was coming to give me a name. And so he prayed, and those old elders, they didn't have too many whiskers. For some reason, they liked the tweezers, like there's trees out there, the whiskers. And so he sat there, kind of humming to himself. He said, aha. He gave me the name Shunkmano. That was his father's name. Shunkmano means, in short, it means horse thief. Horse thief. In the long form, which I came to understand fasting at Bear Butte, means a leader of warriors who takes the enemy's best horses. And in a way, I've traveled. Now, it couldn't happen in Africa, but many places I went, when I was in Spain, or when I was in many places, people thought I was Jewish. When I was in Palestine and Israel, some people thought I was Jewish, sometimes I was Palestinian. So I've been able to really steal a lot of horses because, I could hear different things and so forth. So, each one of us is, I believe, created for what our life's going to be. And each one of us is a spiritual representative of all that have gone before us since the beginning of time when we were one. So from there, Obviously, carrying this hurt that I had. Of course, that drove me for a while in athletics. That was one thing I loved. That's one place I could get that out. But every time I played a football game, it was against this, Custer in the 7th Cavalry. Every time I went in a wrestling match, it was against General Custer, and I had no mercy. And if I could hurt somebody, I would. That's how I felt, because I was hurt. But I'll tell you, holding that rage and anger inside you, eventually you can't live with it. And sure enough, we went from winning up in Vancouver here. They had a competition between the U.S. and Canada. I won my weight class in U.S. Canada at the National Exposition up here in Vancouver, close to where I'm at here. And I want to mention this on the sacred, unsurrendered, unceded land of the Semiahmoo First Nation, Salish Nation. And so winning that, I went clear down the tube. Fell into alcohol, drugs, unhealthy relationships, thoughts of suicide, etc. And then thankfully, in spring 1967, I came and was just extremely touched by this very sacred, these sacred words I encountered. It's another story. But after that, it was like all these, you might say, like sheets fell away, free of alcohol, drugs, all those things. In fact, I kind of call it the spiritual honeymoon of my life. My friends thought, everything was about praying. My friends said, Phil, we feel like if we're going to go to the bathroom, we're going to pray for us, But there's also a teaching that says, do you think you say you believe and will not be tested? Really? Do you think you say you believe and will not be tested? So I had the opportunity. I saw after I ended up back at Walla Walla, some big stories, but long stories, a big story. Other things happened, but eventually I ended back up in Walla Walla, Washington, where I started coaching and teaching at Walla Walla Community College. I think it was 1973, 72. And I saw this opportunity. I came back up to Walla Walla in 1969 and started teaching and coaching at Walla Walla Community College. And then so happened the wrestling program closed up. The Creator does not close the door, but open the window. And then I saw this picture of these relatives down in Bolivia. And they just reminded me, they touched my soul, because they were just as if was looking into the eyes and seeing the people who my father described as a boy at White Swan and on the Honktawa Reservation, Honktawa territories, or in Wakpala, on the Standing Rock. And I just, so my beloved wife at that time, 3 weeks later, we were on a plane. We'd gotten rid of everything, flew down to Peru, and ended up in Sucre, Bolivia. And that was heaven. I never, ever, ever wanted to leave, ever in my life. But then the Creator has different ideas. And so won't get into that part of the story, other than the fact that my wife was brutally raped. While I was over praying with these relatives who'd come in to tell me about what was happening with them. Unbeknownst to me, when we caught this gentleman who did this thing, I remember this very clearly. I turned around and we were here praying. And she was able, through this friend of ours, he was very drunk, probably blacked out. He came in the door and I looked over and I said, "What happened?" She said, "I've just been raped." I said, "You must be kidding me." She took me to the room, and sure enough, that had happened. And this man, you can imagine, from a wealthy family, because it wasn't that long before that, before they passed the Reforma Agraria, where if you were an indigenous person in Bolivia, you could not come in to a city or a town unless you were accompanied by your landlord. Then you had to walk in the street. So he was a son of this wealthy person. And so I came out, and here all these catchers, about 40 of them were there. And I turned to him, I said, "¿Qué pasa con mi señora?" What happened to my wife? No. And just then she jumped behind and she pulled out her underwear. This guy had his modus operandi, because nobody, his family was rich. All the ports were fixed. He would take and do this and then keep those as souvenirs. Can you imagine? Well, I knocked him down, and I'll tell you, I got on top of him and I wanted to drive my fist clear through his face, and I would have hit him. I would have killed him. Because an old man at 78, I could give somebody a pretty sore face. But just as I pulled back, a voice said to me, he's sick. And I looked down and I saw my own face. Because who knows, if without the spiritual path, I'd never have done such a thing. But here he was, blacked out probably. So I grabbed him, threw him up, and then I turned to these my dear brothers, my dear Quechua brothers. Hermanos, ¿conocen qué pasa? Sí, hermano, conocemos. Said, yes, brother. I said, do you know what happened? I said, do you know what happened, brothers? He said, yes, we know what happened, brothers. We know what happened. That's why we came to see you. They're doing this to our wives in front of us, and we can't do anything about it. And that was because they, or myself, realized and knew that the prophecies of the Reunion, the Condor, the Quetzal, and the Eagle, all the incredible prophecies across the Americas prophesy a spiritual movement, a spiritual resolution, not a partisan political resolution. And so what was happening in this happens, probably the greatest issue we have as indigenous peoples, our own disunity caused by colonization. They were trying to organize them into unions, and they didn't choose. They want a spiritual path, and that's why they're raping their wives. And so from that, they gave me the name of the same blood in Quechua. And of course, eventually, I never wanted to leave. My beloved wife had to return up to the United States, and eventually I had to return myself. I was instructed by the Universal House of Justice. But before that, I had a chance to because they were teaching me, because I didn't know about this prophecy of the Condor and Eagle. I knew the prophecies of Black Elk, of the Hopi prophecies, many of the prophecies of the North. But then on July 9th, 1971, we went to Lake Titicaca. At this time, it was completely deserted. Nobody was there. It was deserted. It was completely deserted. And those Quechuas had not been there for hundreds of years, and yet they knew everything. We saved our money. We had to go in the back of an old truck, and we had $16. It cost for the day for the enough to carry the 16 of us out to the Island of the Sun. I'll never forget that. They literally got off and they kissed the earth to be back to where they knew the prophecy said when they came, where it returned there, it would begin to be fulfilled. And little did I know that I was the eagle had come from the north. And so from there, we went, of course, we prayed there, the holy places there on the Island of the Sun. We went by the Island of the Moon. We arrived just as the sun was going down, just twilight, there, what they call Copacabana. And they knew, how they knew, I don't know. They took me back on this long path. And here was carved in this big, huge stone was a royal seat of justice of the Incas. And so because they knew I was heading back home, for whatever reason, they allowed me to sit there, and they all sat together and we prayed that night. And at 13,000 feet, those stars were so incredible. And then as I sat there, it's just like I could feel, when locusts, when they have these big swarms take off, they're all sitting there. All that happens is one locust just looks like this. And just like that, they brush their wings against the next one, and pretty much they all take off. And that night was the experience, was I could feel the rustling of our indigenous people awakening. Well, I thought it was going to happen, like the next day. Little did I know that to our creator, 50 years, shoot, that's just nothing. And I can tell you at 78, that's nothing either. It's like a breath of a buffalo on a cold day, like a firefly on a warm summer night. The breath of a buffalo on a cold day, a firefly on a warm summer night. Like the breath of a buffalo on a cold winter day, or a firefly on a warm summer night, or the shadows vanishing before the setting sun, or the shadows vanishing with the setting. Life, as they say, it's like the breath of a buffalo in a cold day, a firefly on a warm summer night, or the shadows vanishing before the setting sun. And so from there, they tell us, you think you say you believe and will not be tested? Sure, we get tested. And so here I am, like a breath of a buffalo, had the opportunity to work with our indigenous relatives across the Americas, around the world. And here I am. It won't be long before this old earth suit, like my dad said, it wears out. It works out. But we know, and which time when you wish, I'd like to talk about the soul as well. But that's a little bit, I don't know if I exactly, I'm not sure if I kind of answered the question. I got it carried away, but I just let it flow.
And beautifully so. So let's talk about the soul, especially as we're situated here in this field of understanding shamanism, shamanic wisdom, and this idea that there's places in the soul that need to be retrieved, through our traumas and our trials and our tribulations, and also our seeking our healing and the healing of others. What is the soul to our people? And to
Well,
your
yes. No, this is my understanding, because anything that's spiritual has infinite understanding, has infinite meaning. Anything that's spiritual has infinite meanings, infinite. So when people get hung up in these literal interpretations, I think that they better reflect back, because there's so much you understand things at different times of your life. But from my understanding, the best understanding I have from the elders is what each of us is born in this physical plane of time and space. Each of us is born a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting, every one of us. And that's why these ideas about, I have to be very personal thing about shamanism and so forth. Every human being, every one of us has a sacred soul. It's so important to know what that is about, because many people don't know they have a soul. It's not their fault, because we live in a society that's focused on materialism. But at 78 Winters, I tried to summarize what I've learned about the soul, which if I may share. The relationship of our soul with our body is like the connection between a lamp and a mirror. If the mirror is polished and perfected, the light of the lamp appears, but the mirror is broken or covered with dust, the light remains concealed. Our rational soul, the human spirit, does not descend into our bodies or exist through our physical bodies. It's just the opposite. Our soul is the very substance and foundation upon which our body depends for existence. The soul has no gender, race, ethnicity, or class. This reality makes all forms of prejudice, whatever they may be, intolerable and unacceptable. The soul is not divided. It is a reflection of the oneness of our Creator. The soul is endowed from our beginning in this physical world of time and space with its own individuality. Our soul does not acquire it because of our body. The individuality and identity of our soul are strengthened in this world through our tests and difficulties. Our soul is independent of and the very source of our body's existence. If our body is destroyed, our soul and spirit remain unharmed. Our soul, our human spirit, is independent of our physical body. Our soul is free and sanctified beyond this physical plane of time and space. All the powers that distinguish us as human beings, reason, memory, abstract thought, creativeness, inventiveness, willpower, are all properties of the soul, not the body. A love that anyone may have had for anybody will not be forgotten in the spiritual worlds, the other side camp, nor will we forget the life we've had in this physical world. In the spiritual world, we will recognize one another, we'll seek a union, a spiritual union. By the way, we enter the spiritual world here in this physical plane of time and space. That's why, for our Dakota people, we have our blood relatives and we have our Hunka relatives. The Hunka relatives are those you've met and spiritually connect with. In fact, many times, those spiritual relatives are much closer to us and much more enriching to be with than our blood relatives, who we don't choose, who could be very testing at times. But that's also, each has their role.
Yeah, beautiful. So that is very clarifying in terms of who we travel this road with here. Yeah.
Yes.
And along those lines, then, the great challenges that we're facing in our world community, the earth itself, and all of those things that have led us to this point, and what you describe as the global storm.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The spiritual reality, I think, it is a foundation, complete foundation of this transformation is occurring, is to awaken to the spiritual reality of the prior unity and oneness of our human family. We're one human family. And that's why the sacred teaching says we must not rest until we make everybody we know a brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, grandson, granddaughter, niece, nephew. Once we make everybody around us that way, we'll know exactly how to treat them. That's why this whole thing on kinship system, we call by people by their kinship names. But we have to do that now with the whole human family. That's the foundation, because once we understand that, the things we're doing and doing to Mother Earth, the genocide that's been created by the papal bulls, the Doctrine of Discovery, everywhere in the world, how could we do that? I mean, there's certainly some relatives are very sick, but I think it's also to remember that only colonize people, from my perspective. Only hurt people. Only abuse people. Now, I'm sure there's some exceptions where certain an epigenetic way of development, some genes get turned on that shouldn't get turned on, and people are a little bit crazy, especially in this world. But in the old days, in those days when we were living together with a true knowledge, we're all related. And we always use that term. All my relations, truly, all related. The mineral people, the plant relatives, the animal relatives are all relatives of ours. Once we understand that, then we wouldn't destroy the earth. If we really truly understood spiritually what this journey is about, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And so the way I see that part is this. When we're born in this physical plane of time and space, we're so infinitely small. I mean, really small. I mean, the female egg, which is infinite, is so much bigger than the male contribution. But sure enough, boom, that light begins. They've even photographed it. A flash of light goes out. Now, once that happens, by the way, I really want to be clear. Once that happens, we already are at that point a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting, even if we leave this world from the womb. Very important to know this. But what happens? Here we are in the womb world, in our womb suit, so to speak. And here we are, we go through all kinds of different shapes and forms, right? Growing our arms and legs and eyes and ears. Well, do we need them in the womb? I mean, if we tried to use our lungs, we'd drown in the amniotic fluid. I mean, here we are enjoying ourselves, receiving just like we do, receiving through the umbilical cord, nourishment from outer world, outside of the womb world, coming to us. Here we are, and we change our forms until, we don't know exactly, just like we don't know we're going to die. We don't know, and go to the other side camp, we don't know when we're going to be born. But sure enough, we start doing our isometrics, you feel it kicking and so forth. And that's why, in our traditional way, women were treated with such great love and care. They understood how important it was to care for the baby in the mother's womb. And my father used to share this, my grandmother used to share how those relatives who were with child were encouraged to smell beautiful things, to touch soft things, to really, because we're bringing a sacred being into this world, a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, everlasting. Now, think about it, we are veiled from this world of time and space that we're seeing, we're looking at each other right now. Yet all those around knew we're coming, right? They knew that. We didn't know it. I mean, we know that there's certain songs we began to sing. We knew vibration was so important because the child begins to react, because it's about vibration. We're electrical beings, not chemical beings. That's why both Einstein and Tesla said the future of medicine's frequency. So anyway, sure enough, the time comes for us to make our journey. And it's not an easy journey sometimes. And here we are making our way, through the womb. to come into this world here. And many people experience of near-death experience the same. It's like going through and all of a sudden you see light, and then we come into this world. And we leave behind our womb suit. Now, you can imagine if I kept it around, I told one of my daughters about this. Oh, Dad, that'd be gross going around with your placenta over your shoulder. But we also cared for that. In fact, the very umbilical cord was taken, and when you see these rosettes like this one's from the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, that was actually where you kept that part of that umbilical cord, kept it with you. And then, of course, they began to put quill work and bead work and so forth. Now we have this to remind us where we came from. And so here we are. I've got my earth suit, right? And so what's the purpose here? Is it to grow my earth suit? Well, I'll tell you one thing. we're not going to grow our earth suit. It wears out. That's a fact. Well, shoot, I used to be about 6 feet. No, I'm just kidding. I used to be at least 2 or 3 inches taller. So I used to be about 5'8.5". I'm down to 5'6". And, my hair used to be curly. The curl's gone. My plumbing used to be perfect. Not perfect anymore. And that just naturally happens. Because the whole purpose of this life is to grow our spiritual arms and legs, eyes, and ears. The qualities will empower us through the infinite worlds of the Creator. Kindness, compassion, forgiveness, justice. That justice is a foundation, really, of this new world that's unfolding. Because from justice, then we understand that there must be equality of women and men. We understand there must be universal education. We must understand we must balance extremes of wealth and poverty. We must understand that every human child has a right to education, to clean water. And so here we are, growing our spiritual arms and legs and eyes and ears. And that also has a cycle: infancy, childhood, adulthood, eldership. And so in a way, just like individually we grow like that, so has our human family been going through this. From infancy, childhood, and now we're leaving our adolescence. And we have, if you look at the world in a much more painful way, but adolescence can be pretty traumatic. But we're now emerging to our spiritual adulthood, an incredible time, an incredible time. They call it the day that shall not be followed by night.
So tell us more about that and how we can actively participate in making that shift and making that change and stepping onto that path.
Well,
How do we take responsibility?
Yeah, I think that the name of the Shift Network is perfect to reflect this. Because really it's about each one of us are responsible for the healing of our own soul. Meaning that when I get hurt and somebody hurts me, it's not their hurt jumping into me. It's my own hurt being re-stimulated. So I personally, for myself, I realize now I'm in a life, for myself, I realize I'm in that part of that life where I need to leave behind the old warrior, and working at it, becoming the wise elder. Because the wise elder realized that everything in life comes from our own perfecting. Everything. And outwardly, it might seem like fire and vengeance, but inwardly, it's purifying water. For it wasn't Tess. How would you know the precious diamond from the worthless pebble? If it weren't for tests and difficulties, how would you know the coward from the courageous? And so I believe that this really means we have to be able to, whatever spiritual tradition we come to, because I really believe the foundation of all spiritual traditions, all spiritual faiths that bring unity and harmony and kindness and forgiveness are one and the same. They're the foundation of a fully matured human being, which, by the way, run a spectrum from quote unquote the feminine dimension to the masculine dimension. I think what we have to look at today is not this duality, women and men. We have to be able to understand that we have to have each of us full qualities of the human being. Obviously, the world has been way, way overbalanced in masculine dimensions, masculine qualities. It's brought us to almost destroying the entire world. And so that's why I really believe that it's womankind that is going to be the ones that are going to lead us to the inevitable peace on earth that's before us. So there's so many practices we can do. I've tried my best. I've traveled to India, went there first in 1982 to study meditation, which I think is very important, because I think that an hour's beautiful reflection is worth more than 100 years of pious worship. Outside where we go and go through the motions, it has to be done in the heart. You have to be able to feel it. Like this one elder told me a long time ago. He says, Taco Jacques, grandson, you're never going to solve the issues before you solely through the intellect. Because for every problem the intellect solves, it creates 10 more. That's the nature of the intellect. We should be thankful. That's what's given us all this incredible science. But for every problem it solves, it creates 10 more. It's only when we open the heart and the tears flow. And before you know it, our heart and mind become one. But he said also, remember, Taco Jacques, that's the longest road in the world, is from here to here. And so when we come connected, then when we speak, it just flows. It flows. Another thing I think is important was 1982, through some resources, the year monies, I was asked to put together a curriculum for the prevention of alcoholism and drug abuse for across Canada. Of course, when this brother came from Ottawa, they started the National Native Alcohol and Drug Abuse Program and asked me to do this. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, that's quite a job. But if you'll allow me to use this money any way I want, that means from health and welfare, so for tobacco or whatever, and let me invite elders and let's ask them. Because I realize elders are a lot more important than just doing the opening prayer. So sure enough, we brought 40 elders. Many tribes have never been together. Some tribes have been enemies, quote unquote, and fought each other. They all came together 4 days and 4 nights at an old residential school on the Blood Reserve, Kainai Nation. And we came and we talked. And in fact, I was a professor at the University of Washington. At the time, I was a professor at the University of Lethbridge. So I even had they had these big computers, had them figure out. So I made sure every elder could sit in a small talking circle with every other elder. And we had large circles. And the last night, we spent all night long praying, all the way around, singing and praying. And we had a ceremony and drove a stake in the ground, said, from where we stand here, we're going to move forward. And what, in essence, the elders told us was this, so key, so deep. They said this universe we live in is organized according to certain natural laws. These physical and spiritual laws are inseparably connected. They said it's easy to understand the physical laws. If you jump off a 10-story building on your head, you're going to get a headache. If you run a car 100 miles an hour into a concrete wall and get smashed up, drink a glass of arsenic, you're going to get a big stomachache. They said the spiritual laws are every bit as real. And they said, we're going to begin with 4. And the 4, where development comes from within. Others can help and assist, but emerge from the individual, the family, the tribe, the community, the nation, so forth. No vision, no development. Developing people need a vision of possibility. And the greatest vision we can have, better than any book, is our own self. How we are. Because if we look in the mirror and see how we are, it's exactly how our grandchildren see us. And they don't get fooled. So, or no participation, no development. Everybody needs to participate. We're spiritual as well as physical beings, and so forth. So after that, we had a second meeting right after 1982. We met again in 4 years. 1987, right after, in February 1987, we had 100 elders come. And then we proceeded on. And just to give an example of this discourse that took place at that time, one of the discussions was, where do we begin? Some people said, begin from the people at the top. We said, oh no, they're too corrupt. And other people say, oh no, we got to begin with grassroots. And this will be, oh, they don't have enough power. And then one of the elders said, where in the world did you learn to think either or? It's got to be a top-down, bottom-up approach. Both. The other thing that we discussed was we were promoting spirituality, spiritual principles, spiritual values. And some people were saying, well, you have no right to tell me I can't go snort coke in my house by myself. A school teacher, one case, I can't go snort. That's my own time business. So we went back and forth. Well, do we have a right to stand up and say, we need these spiritual values? And one of the elders also stood up and said, the moral dimension of development is inescapable. You cannot build healthy human beings or healthy communities on lies, on greed, on all the things we see that this whole civilization that we're now living in was built in, and it's being destroyed from within because it has no foundation.
Yeah, it sounds like if it has no foundation in the inner world, it cannot possibly become a reality in the outer world.
Exactly, because no great civilization throughout history is destroyed until it's destroyed from within.
So tell us then about those that can perceive us with the truth with fresh eyes, in the seventh generation.
Oh, yes.
And this piece of healing that's on the way.
Yes. And to kind of put that in context, I'll talk about this global storm.
Yes.
Because we have this global storm going on. And there's no place on Mother Earth that is not being impacted. Climate change. And then we have economic war going on. We have conventional war going on. I mean, here we are in this whole conflict with Russia and Ukraine. We're beginning to understand that the hurt of one is a hurt of all. We're going to the gas stations and going to get food, and that continues. Then we see what's happening with Taiwan and China. That's on the verge. Then we see our relatives over in North Korea who feel that they are being threatened. This is not the path. And then we can see we have cyber war going on. We have spiritual war going on. We have religious war going on. I mean, we're in this tremendous time of transformation and change. But I like to liken it to if somebody only knew what it was like to live in the winter, and everything was white snow, all the streams were frozen and so forth. But here comes the spring. That springtime comes, the winds come, and all of a sudden what you thought was solid is gone. That white snow. Even the tiniest little seed underneath that you didn't even know under the water begins to germinate. If one of them gets in a little crack in a stone and breaks that stone open, my gosh, you see the whole world changing like this. Oh no, it's the end of the world. No, this is just the springtime. It's just the purifying time, the time of purification. And so that's where we're at. So it is a global storm. And if we don't wake up, by the way, we're going to get through this. There's no question about that. But to the degree we get through it is the degree we're going to spiritually wake up and realize we're one human family. We've always been one human family from the beginning of time. And the hurt of one is the hurt of all, including all our relatives, our water relatives, plant relatives, animal relatives. We're all one. At the same time, that understanding is we also know the healing of one, the restoration of one. All that is also for the all, is a healing and restoration of all. So, that's this global storm. Now, the seventh generation, of course, this whole understanding of the seventh generation thinking or decision-making, past and present, is really understanding a lot about how we are truly, each of us, a spiritual representative of all that have gone before us, each of us. So it's not like just you and I sitting here. It's all the relatives that went before us, everyone. And these prophecies talk about that there would, at this time of great change, there would arise was the seventh generation, which the young people are rising. And they are rising up because they're backed up by all the prayers of all those relatives who have gone to the spiritual worlds, but who are still with us. And it's quite amazing. When I was a professor at the University of Lethbridge, we did quite an in-depth study, and it became very clear that the population of indigenous peoples across the Americas was about 100 million indigenous people who were living together in relative peace and harmony. We had kinship trails stretching across the Americas, north and south. In fact, all the we call them kinship trail trade routes. All the highways and byways today are built on our trade routes. And we live together in relative peace and harmony. That's why almost 80% of every bit of food being eaten on Mother Earth today was domesticated here. The gold and silver here and in brother relative, the same thing happened in Africa. Our relatives in Africa and other places in the world, it was gold and silver from here, from there, from other places that the papal bulls, the Doctrine of Discovery, said you could take and enslave all these people who weren't quote unquote Christians, then enrich the whole world. At the same time, we knew without question this was going to happen ahead of time. That's why I was talking, go back to Bolivia. Those elders explained to me. And so I like to look at it like this, sister. We're just leaving a 500-year Sundance. And we're leaving that Sundance stronger than we've ever been, more united than we've ever been. And we have a destiny. The Creator didn't put us through this for nothing. For nothing. We didn't do all this suffering at boarding schools and all those things that happened that I had to witness because I worked a lot in this area. In fact, we opened up this with a film called Healing the Hurts. We didn't go through this for anything. Our Creator does not put us through anything just to punish. That's not true. Because we're being prepared. We're being prepared. In fact, I remember one story I got to tell you. When I was younger, in 1978, of course, I had curly black hair, and I, this and that, and I was invited to speak at different graduations, and I'd go on about how wonderful our elders were, how we cared for our young people, how we cared, all these beautiful things about us, and how great we were, and this and that. And I could see as I looked out, happened to be at Rocky Boy in Montana. The elders were happy, the parents were happy, most of the young people, seemed to be happy, but there was one young man, I could tell it was not at all, he had another point of view. So sure enough, I knew he was going to come talk to me. Because afterward we had to eat. We always want to eat, what that is. We had to eat together. So we're eating. So sure enough, I went to get some food and he came over. He said, Phil, he said, I heard all these things you said about how great we were and how we respected all the natural world and loved each other and took care of each other and so forth and so on. He said, I just got one question. If we were so wonderful and we loved the Creator so much and we prayed so much and we were such spiritual people, then why did God punish us? He said it just like that. Why did God punish us? Well, I said, that's a good question. And of course, by that time, I'd heard from elders. I said, well, I better go. I said, I'll go pray about that. I'll let you know. Because, I really had to think about that. So how so happened I was going to go pray up at Bear Butte. And so I went up there to Bear Butte, and after that was a Sundance. And as I prayed up at Bear Butte, I really prayed about this question. I prayed, what, why? And then as I was sundancing after Bear Butte, all of a sudden came clear to me. When we go up to fast and we go without food and water, and I tell you what, if you're really hot up there in Bear Butte, your lips crack, your tongue gets thick. But when you get done, you come down and you're different. Right, you're different. Go Sundance for 2 days and 2 nights. Well, Pete catches like the dance for 2 days and 2 nights called two blue days, 2 yellow days. Boy, when you come out, you're grown a little bit. Well, we've been through a 500-year Sundance because we have never, ever surrendered spiritually. We have continued to pray no matter what's happened. Terrible things that we're uncovering here in Canada of all these children, over 10,000 now, found in unmarked graves. Personal stories I heard. One was where they took a little baby who'd come from being impregnated by a priest. These nuns dressed the little baby up, came downstairs. We had the bakery because I actually heard this directly from the little girl who was there. They opened up the furnace and they took and dressed the baby up. That's what I couldn't, that's nice. And they threw the baby in the incinerator. And all that she said she could hear was, "Ee!" Gone. But that child is a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, everlasting. Yeah, the earth suit was gone. But that pure child is right here with us. And so, as I said, we're a spiritual representative of all who come before us. And so this younger, we'll call it seventh generation, these young people, they're growing everywhere on Mother Earth. Because really, we have to, once we wake up to the reality, all of us, every member of the human family is an indigenous person on Mother Earth. That's what we got to get back to. That understanding. And so right now in the Americas, we have the fastest growing population in the Americas, the youngest population, and the majority of people living in the Americas have some quote unquote degree, I don't get into that, but have some indigenous background that links them here. But also they're Mother Earth too. And we're awakening to that.
And beautiful. And what is it that the seventh generation, what is the promise that it holds for us in terms of creating a new reality here that human beings are living in? What is our hope here?
Well, now the prophecies, from my understanding, tell us that at this time the day shall not be followed by night. Our younger generations are becoming so illumined, they shall enlighten the entire world, because they are result of all the prayers, of all the hopes and dreams of all that have gone before them. And we can see them arising. I mean, look at Standing Rock. It was a young Toja there, a young Takoja. Look at Standing Rock, Wakpala, South Dakota. There was a young Takoja, Bobby Three Legs, who arose with this vision. It was the young people that led that. It's the young people of this world that are letting go of all these crazy things we're holding on to. So we're going to let go of all of it to become new. Everywhere they're understanding each other through music. They're understanding each other through seeing the insanity that's going on right now. And they're becoming unified. They're becoming one, not just our indigenous young people of the Americas and our tribes, but they're uniting with others. But it is a process. I believe the process first is differentiation, meaning if you took 40 learning theories, first stage is differentiation. You got to break things up. So we have to understand how we all fit, first of all, in our own unique ways. Then integration. We're seeing that. And then generalization. Pretty soon, there's no thought. You just see another human being. That's all. That doesn't mean we let go of our unique, beautiful cultural beauty, our dancing, all those beautiful things that uplift us, that cause us to really touch the spiritual world. And that's why the elders tell us there's 4 simple systems by which we mediate our experience with this world. First, there's mathematics. And if you think about it, everything in this physical world of time and space, we can mediate through mathematics in the highest forms. Then how do we mediate our experience between ourselves as human beings? All forms of language, spoken and unspoken. But then how do we mediate our experience with the unknown world? Through the arts. Through the arts. And when you combine the singing and dancing all together, then we touch the great masterpiece in art. Why do people attract to go to these big art museums? To see all this art, because it helps us touch the unknown world. And then how do we mediate experience with ourselves? Through dreams. Through our dreams.
So, Brother Phil, tell us about dreams and how important and what is the significance of the great dream returning here and our personal dream within that greater dream that's dreaming us.
Yes. Well, it's so fascinating how science, how anything they can't understand, they call it a paradox. They for instance, they of course have all these machines they can hang all these machines they can put on you, and so about measuring your brainwaves, they have all these machines they can put on to measure your brainwaves. And so we know when we're awake like this, my brainwaves, you can really see them, very active. But as we begin to fall asleep, and all our senses, our eyes, our ears, everything turns off, and really can become dead to this world. That brain waves go down, 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 down. All of a sudden, boom, there's more brain activity than when we're awake. Of course, they call that a paradox. Well, we know what it is. That's when we begin connecting, with this incredible, infinite, spiritual world, when our soul, integrates what happened, but also other things come to us. And we know as well, there's those dreams in which we mediate our experience with this everyday world. I mean, maybe we ate too much pizza or whatever, but then there's those holy dreams that come. They usually come early in the morning. They're very bright colored. They're bright colored. And they wake you up, or you don't forget them. But we're always dreaming, because all you have to do to check and see how important it is to retouch our soul is just keep somebody awake for 7 days with no sleep. You completely fall apart, because you've got to go back within to really gain your strength, but also to make sense of this outer world. So dreams, visions is really, I'll tell you a story that happened when I was sun dancing back in 1980. We had this incredible, wonderful elder, Pete Ketches. And so I remember it really hot. He'd like to dance 2 days and 2 nights. And so it was really hot in the afternoon. And I guess I'd heard about if you went to a sun dance, you'd fall down and have a vision, And so I was kind of wanting to have a vision. That was, and so we started dancing, and all of a sudden we're facing east, and I saw all these spots floating in front of my eyes. My gosh, maybe my vision's coming. Maybe this spot's going to open up. I'm going to step in there. My body will fall back, and I'll be in this other world, and I'll see these things come back with a great vision. So of course, when you're dancing, you're facing east, and of course we went and faced south and west and so forth, and north, and so afterwards, so we danced the 4 directions, and afterwards I came back to Pete, and I had a little tobacco, and I said, Pete, I said, I danced facing this direction. I saw these spots in this direction. I saw these spots, And of course I was expecting him to tell me, and he was going, like, oh yes, I understand. I thought, it's even got me more excited to tell about these spots I was seeing. He said, yes. He said, I know what that is. I was just waiting. He said, that's fatigue. He said, when you dance for 2 days and 2 nights, you get fatigue. He said, but don't worry. He said, we're going to soon have some choke cherry juice and so forth and like that. You'll be fine. He said, remember this though. He said, be careful about asking for a vision. Because what happens is, he said, the Creator opens this door, opens the veils, and you see the potentiality of yourself, potentiality of the people, or whatever you see. But then the Creator closes it, and then you have to fulfill it, and you won't rest until you do. So we see things. We see what we can be. We see what our relatives can be. We see what prophecies are. But then we have that time, and then we have to fulfill it. And that's not easy. That takes a lot of prayers, and you fall down a lot. But even the failures, if they teach you about life and life's sacred, they're sacred. They're just as sacred as the victories. It's all sacred. It's all sacred. All of it.
It's all sacred, yeah. And how can our listeners and our viewers connect with that piece of themselves and take responsibility for that piece that understands that we all emerge from a sacred reality? We all come from people who understand this, and in a way that doesn't culturally appropriate Native ways of life, but that connects directly with their purpose and the vision that Creator has for them here.
Well, I think that the guidance the elders gave us back in 1982, and between Christmas and New Year's, is is those 16 principles that emerge from that as a guidance. And first of all, we have to know what comes within us, ourself. We've got to find the peace and love in here, and know that I'm fully responsible for that. That's why when you conclude what you say, as a Dakota, you say, Shinkmano Hemedo, or Shinupasaba Hemedo. My name is so on and forth. And I stand responsible before the Creator for my words and my actions. Each of us is responsible for that. Not anybody else. We are responsible. We are responsible to purify our hearts and minds. And there's many, many practices. Shift Network has incredible programming for anybody who wishes and chooses. You got to choose to make the journey. That's the number one thing. We can change our world, but we have to make a choice. We have choices. We can choose to immerse ourselves in the material world and think that's going to somehow satisfy us, or we can choose the spiritual path. My dad said, the spiritual path's a good path, but it's a tough path. That's true. But I'll tell you this, when you get to be older, that's where you find your happiness. And that's why for elders, I have to really say, I feel for our elders, the ones that are feeling like, by the way, I remember I studied economics in one of my master's classes, and they actually had charted the value of a human being by how economically profitable, or they actually had a graph that showed a human being value by how much economically they contribute. So all of a sudden you see going up about 50, you go down like that. But for us, we knew that any society, and my uncle Vine Deloria Jr. said this, any society will be judged in history of how they treat those at the sunrise and the twilight of their lives. How we treat those elders and how we treat children. And we can see how elders are treated in these societies. And thankfully, still we have a lot of elder abuse in our own communities, but still that honor of elders is still with us. And it's growing stronger and stronger. And the honor of the young people. And it's time for the young people to arise. It's time, and they are. You don't have to be told. It's coming right out of their soul. Lila June Johnson, I think Johnston is one of the great examples. Toja Lila June. And others, so many others, some we don't even know, who are standing up their communities, who are saying, just a minute, no more of this. We're building a different world. They're understanding the prophecies, and we have so many prophecies. We're so rich in spiritual teachings. We're just rich, more rich than any billionaire upon the face of this Mother Earth. Because you can't take it with you. I remember in my day, there was the most richest man in the world. His name was Howard Hughes. My dad always told me only 6 people showed up at his funeral, probably his lawyers fighting over his money. He said, no dump truck came in there and dumped his money down the coal with him. We're going to leave everything behind except our soul. That's the part. That's the part we have to work on and develop. And there's many ways to do that. So many we could have all kinds of programs about that. We're rich with that if we choose.
We're rich with soul. We are. Brother Phil, given what we've talked about today, what is one thing that you would like to leave us with that can help us make the change that is necessary in our lives?
Well, we were in Jordan, Palestine, and Israel in 2020, right before COVID hit. And we were a whole group of about 120 of us from every spiritual tradition of Mother Earth. And it was called Holy Land Living Water. And on the 6th of February, 2020, we went to Armageddon, Megiddo, literally the place where they say that the force of darkness and light are going to happen. And of course, there's all these interpretations. And we went there, all prayed together to end war and begin peace on earth. And then as things unfolded, it became very, very clear to me. And that's why we have this every month during 2022. 22 women on the 27th of every month are praying to unify our human family. That is to awaken to the fact we are one human family. It's not that we are becoming one, we are one. To unify our human family, to end war and begin peace on earth by 2030. I believe that's possible. And that doesn't mean, by the way, other people have agendas for 2030. This agenda has nothing to do with some antichrist showing up or a small group of people dominating everybody. It has to do truly with a new global civilization based in justice, in which every member of the human family is honored and respected, in which all the beautiful parts of our culture are respected, and that we understand that each of us is a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting.
And that is the promise from Creator.
Absolutely.
Brother Phil, where can people access this work beyond our talk today and our session today?
Well, we have our Four Worlds International Institute, fwii.earth is one access. If you're interested to see our projects at this point, you can see our Four Worlds Global Impact Fund, which is dedicated to empowering Indigenous people to fulfill our prophecies and to bring peace on earth.
Brother Phil, thank you for the great honor of being with you today, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your vision and your shared vision, communicating the peace that is possible in our world, the shift that is actually possible, not only possible, but on the way. And I know that I and all of our listeners can get behind this vision.
Great. And I want to say this last thing.
Yes.
If anything I've said makes sense, if any qualities I reflect, people see. If you didn't already have them, you couldn't see them in me. I'm just a mirror. That's all. Just a mirror. Because each of us is sacred. Every one of us. Oh. Shakmano he meado, chinupasaba meado how we chante washte. Oh.